Welcome to the show. Now please strap in for the truth and remember the words of the great Tom Cruise.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Now welcome to Off Topic on Porn.
Brother-in-law mentioned to me that I forgot to introduce myself last week. I don't know why I did that. I guess because I know who I am, so I assume that everyone knows who I am. No, I'm James Aldridge. I'm one of the hosts of Off Topic on Point. Usually we have it's usually myself and Russell, but Russell is on vacation, so I'm kind of flying solo this week. And so there's been a lot of stuff in the news. Might as well just jump right to it. In our first story, I wanted to cover President Joe Biden, or I should say former President Joe Biden. He's going through a bit of a cancer scare right now. Now, it was announced back in 2025 that he had prostate cancer, but the more recent news is that the cancer had metastasized and spread to his bones. He's actually not expected to live. I don't know when the good Lord is going to take him home, but it's a foregone conclusion. It's incurable cancer. And one of the things I like to point out with respect to this is that people have been surprisingly civil related to his untimely news. Unfortunately, this was announced by Hunter Biden, his son. The only nastiness I've seen is it's been coming from the left. There are people who are saying, why couldn't it be Trump? It would really suck if President Biden died before President Trump. And it's like, okay, come on, folks. We talked about this, the age of civility. You can disagree with someone and not wish actual literal harm or death on that person. Now, I certainly don't agree with President Biden on a lot of issues, but you know what? I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And, all I can say is good thoughts and prayers for the Biden family. And I hope, and I don't know his spiritual state, but I hope he comes to faith before he passes away. So that's one of the things that's been heavily on our minds. It's funny how the left don't think that they have to be civil. They feel perfectly at liberty to hate the other person, to despise the other person, I saw memes that talked about how that show Jesus picking up Donald Trump and tossing him into hell. And so that's what they think. And so I guess if Trump is the devil, then any bad thing that happens to him is good. Although that's not the biblical message. We shouldn't be that way. This notion of people disowning family members and ending friendships over who's in office, that's kind of ridiculous. You can say, I think we can be grown up enough to have differences in opinions, but not dissociate from one another. So there's that story. The next story I want to talk about is something going on right here in San Antonio. As you all know, this podcast is recorded in San Antonio. Before, with Rob and Trav, it was recorded from San Antonio and Galix, Virginia. But now I am in San Antonio. Russell's in San Antonio. One of the things I wanted to talk about is San Antonio becoming yet another Democratic city, a Democratic demolished city. We've heard stories about how cities like Portland, Seattle, and all these other places, many cities in California, they started off with robust economies, large corporate base, but then you elect these liberal, democratic, socialist mayors, and they're harboring ideas like defund the police, let's get rid of sports teams, let's get rid of large corporations because we want to overtax them. Of course, this is what's going on in New York City with Mayor Ma'am Danny. I always butcher his name. the mayor of New York, the socialist mayor of New York. And one of the things we've seen all across the country is that big corporations don't have a problem with packing up and leaving. The Boeing company, huge aerospace company, they manufacture aircraft for the civilian market as well as aircraft for the military market. They forever had a corporate headquarters in the Seattle area. They moved to Chicago years ago and took all those jobs with them. And these are things that people don't think about. If you push the rich or the corporate class or the sports team owners, they leave. They don't have to be in your city. So let's not take this adversarial approach. Now, what's going on in San Antonio is that you have San Antonio Mayor Gina Ortiz Jones. Of course, San Antonio is home to the San Antonio Spurs. Made it all the way to the NBA Finals. Very important sports team for our market. This mayor, wants to rip up the what's called Project Marvel. It's the downtown development deal that the city and the county and the Spurs team, brokered in order to build a brand new stadium downtown. It's supposed to be transformative, keep the team in San Antonio, prevent them from leaving, yada yada, etc. I mean, many teams do this. They negotiate for better stadium packages and arenas. Well, the brilliance of Mayor Jones is that she wants to, even though San Antonio voters voted on this and approved it, she wants another vote, another election. I guess she thinks that she can play hardball with the Spurs and threaten voters with, well, we may have to raise property taxes, so we can either do that or we can vote to get rid of the Spurs deal. Just playing hardball. And the thing she doesn't realize is that the Spurs organization doesn't have to be here. There's already been talk that the Spurs may move to Austin. They can become the Austin Spurs. So they don't have to be in our lovely city. And what Mayor Jones doesn't realize, and what these Democratic mayors don't realize, is that if you push out the sports, push out the business, push out the millionaires and billionaires, you're going to be left with a really awful, dilapidated inner core. I mean, there's a reason why, Chicago is such a, awful place, while Portland's overrun by homeless people and drug addicts, and places like San Francisco, which is so expensive. It's either the very rich or the very poor. And this is something that's just nutty. And I for one, don't want San Antonio to fall in that trap. The other thing Mayor Jones wants to do is that she wants to end what's called our Ready to Work program. Another thing that the city voted on. A portion of our sales tax dollars are going to fund things like job training. So if someone, let's say, works at a fast food restaurant, but they want to upgrade their skills and maybe go to nursing school or welding school, truck driving school, whatever, they can get the paid training, and then they can use that training to get a better job. So Mayor Jones wants to end that program, all because the city of San Antonio is looking at a $158 million budget deficit. So she figures if I can just end the Spurs deal and I can just get rid of this workforce program, well, there you go. That solves the problem. Except one problem: if people aren't trained for good-paying jobs, and there's nothing really fun to do in San Antonio, if there's no Spurs, then why would this be a vibrant community? These Democratic mayors are so short-sighted. I don't get it. Anyway, enough about that. The third story I want to cover is this is interesting. In North Carolina, a father of a little girl in 4th grade, is suing the school district because they refused to let him know whether biological males can use the girls' restroom at his daughter's school. Now, he's not asking for names. He's just wondering if it's happening. And the school district is saying, we can't say. Student privacy, patient privacy, 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 privacy. And I wanted to say, what about the privacy of this little girl? And this is not just going on in school districts. I mean, obviously, we're seeing that in organizations like, the WNBA. In Texas, we had the bathroom bill that was passed about a year ago, restricting access to gyms, lockers, public bathrooms. They want to limit it by sex, by gender. And I, for one, don't have a problem with that because bottom line is there's really nothing you should be doing in the bathroom other than, using the bathroom. And so, but I think that there's concern that there are people who are going to take advantage of that to harm little girls. Even in the news the other day, Sophie Cunningham, she's a basketball player. She plays for the Indiana Fever. She made some pretty controversial statements. Basically, she said that biological males should not play sports against women. And she says that's pretty common sense. But if you can imagine, there's been people that are protesting, calling her MAGA, Barbie, and all these kinds of names, all because she dared saying that, hey, you know what? There is such a thing as male. There is such a thing as female. Men should play against men. Women should play against women. Pretty common sense. Every sport, since there was a thing called sports, has operated this way. It's kind of ridiculous. Oh my gosh. Anyway, my fourth story I wanted to talk about is I was reading this Spider-Man Brand New World came out, and it's like, it's pulling in a box office of like 350 some odd million dollars. And I know that's kind of an off-topic kind of story, but I think it's interesting that despite what's going on in the world, I think people still resonate with the idea of a hero, someone who's a super, there's heroes in the world, teachers, coaches, police officers, etc. But there's this desire to have a superhero, someone who's more than any bad guy in the world, greater than any politician, any person with money, any villain. And this idea of someone who can come in and, clean the world up and make the world a better place. I think that's something that's kind of embedded in us. And I was looking this up because I remember reading this years ago, back in 1938. Two high school friends, Jerry, I believe it's Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, they created Spider-Man. I mean, no, not Spider-Man. They created Superman. And these were two Jewish kids, and they drew heavily from the Bible, the Torah. They modeled the Superman character kind of after the Messiah. Messiah ben David, this conquering Messiah who's going to come down. He's more than a man, he's a Superman. He's an Übermensch, quoting the German. And he's going to come down and set things right. And, and I think about that, 1938, as a build-up for World War II. Germany was on the move. Evil forces were taking over the world. I think that was the fear back in the 20th century, bleeding into the 21st century. And I think with respect to that, I think it shows that deep within all of us, we desire someone super to come in and make everything right. Now, it's interesting about Superman because they based that character on the Messiah. Now, of course, as Jewish people, they didn't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But in actuality, that is kind of the picture. We as Christians look forward to the day where Jesus returns and sets things right. Jesus, who is more powerful than any king, he's King of Kings, Lord of Lords. coming down from the clouds to set things right, to make things fair, to root out oppression, incorruption, and pay out and balance the scales a bit. I think that's something we can talk to people about, because I remember I don't really share this often, but actually, believe it or not, I actually went to graduate school for a degree in apologetics. And one of the things we talk about a lot is that God will use, transcendent themes in our culture to kind of make that bridge to spiritual things. So you can even talk to someone who's a comic book nerd. And I say that lovingly because I'm a comic book nerd too. Talk to someone who's into DC Comics, Marvel Comics, anime, whatever you can imagine. And you can use these concepts to say, hey, you know what? You know how you desire for people to have superpowers and to do amazing things. Well, you know what? There is someone like that. His name is Jesus. And unlike the Pulp Fiction, Jesus is real. He was seen by multitudes of people. He is going to set things right. And I think that's a good thought. So anyway, those are some of the ideas and topics I want to talk to everyone about and kind of chew on that. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. One of the things we talk about a lot is one, you can always like and subscribe this podcast. You can drop a comment in the links, drop a link in the comments, or drop a comment. You can email us at, I believe I think it's OTOP at, oh, I have to look it up. You can email us. You can look at the description. Unfortunately, I don't have our email address handy, but mostly you can just comment and you can share this podcast. And yeah, if you like what we're doing here on Off Topic On Point, let us know. Thumbs up. Give us a thumbs down even. Tell us that this is the worst podcast in the universe. It's okay. But anyway, that's our show. I know it's a little long-winded. Of course, I have no one else to talk to but you all in OTOP land. And just one final thing. You don't always have to be on topic. You can be off topic, but you must always be on point. That's our show. James Aldridge, signing off. Bye-bye.